Ladies and gents, hope you're well. I hope you had a fantastic day so far. This week, I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to Jackie. Now, Jackie helps speakers, starting speakers, and also established speakers to get better at talking and to create their talks that allow them to connect with their audience and really get that emotional connection that we look for whenever we create content, but also when we're talking on a stage as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Jackie to explain a little bit more about what she does. Thank you ever so much for coming back, and I'll see you in just a moment.
I'm Jackie Goddard. I am founder of Power to Speak, and I get people excited about standing in front of an audience, which scares the bejesus out of lots of people. But I'm from an acting background, so I use all of my acting experience to put people at ease and get them performance ready. So if they've got a business message or an idea that they want to share with the world, then I can help them shape their content and get them on stage.
Fantastic. And thanks ever so much for joining me, Jackie. It was great to have you on and talk about everything speaking. I think the starting question for those who are maybe not used to doing speaking, because, as you know, I started my speaking journey properly this year. And something that I found was I was expecting to be a lot more confident than I actually was in front of a room, because obviously I have a background in creating video content, right? But I think sometimes we get into a false sense of security when it comes to, let's say, I'm really good at creating video content. How would you help people either deal with not being confident in general, but also transitioning from creating presentations like this, where we're talking to camera, to actually talking to a room? Because I think for me anyway, it's a similar skill set, but it's not the same.
I would say, first of all, don't expect that you will just be able to do it. It does, like you've found yourself, it takes baby steps, and you just need to do a little bit at a time. Don't take a whole big chunk and think, right, I can step on stage in front of 50 people, 100 people, and because I'm good in conversation, I will naturally be able to speak to a crowd. Because if you are not confident in what you're saying, then that's never going to work. So what you need to do is just find what it is that you want to say, believe in the words that you are speaking, and practice. I mean, practice, obviously, that's an obvious, but just do it in areas and spaces and in front of people that you feel comfortable with until you are ready to make that next step up. So whether that's just creating little videos for yourself that nobody else sees, that don't go anywhere, whether it's sitting around a dinner table and introducing a presentation to your friends, or just take baby steps. You're not going to be able to just step out there and do it automatically. And the other issue that lots of people have is that they are reluctant to rehearse and practice, because they think somehow it will make them stale, or make them look as if they're not being natural, when actually the more they practice, the more natural they will seem.
I really agree with that. I think there's a level though of you just have to do it no matter how uncomfortable it is, especially at the beginning, right? Because so many of us sometimes will do things, especially at the moment, where we're seeing lots of businesses have to pivot or change or tweak or adapt or add services, etc., to what they're doing because of the economic challenges that we're looking at over the course probably the next 2 years, likely. In that respect, and I think it's something which so many people could do, but they are maybe hesitant towards, and hence why I wanted to get you on to talk about it, because I think it's really important for people who are business owners to now become thought leaders, because if they're not, why should I go to them for whatever they sell, right? Why should I go to them? The next question that I think is probably really poignant with the audience is going to be, there's kind of I think in some ways a misconception with, should you do free speaking engagements, right? Because I think there's an illusion sometimes that we see, the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, or the Grant Cardones of the world, or the Tony Robbins of the world, or etc. Whoever the big fish, so to speak, speaking on stages, and we think, oh wow, that's really cool. They get to make lots of money talking on a stage, and it's really perceivably easy, and this and this and this, right? But I think from a starting speaker point of view, because the thing is that, from my understanding, it's like anything. You have to build up to the concept of getting paid, and you have to build up to the concept of going to conferences and talking to conferences. And it's a, if you really want to be really simple with it, it's a supply and demand curve, right? It's the more speaking gigs you do, the higher you're increasing the demand of you as a speaker by proxy, and especially if you're then distributing it as content, it would then help that, right? But what would you say to people who are concerned, worried, or they're like, oh no, that I wouldn't do free talks because what's the benefit to me? It's my time, energy, resources, etc.
It's called practice. And it's, you know, it's everything that I've just said. It's doing those making those baby steps. I've spoken to some fantastic keynote speakers that, you know, did 90 or 100 speaking gigs without being paid. And then were absolutely gobsmacked when somebody turned around and said, "Yeah, I definitely want to pay you. And this is what you're, you know, you have a worth, you have a value because you have practiced, you know your stuff, you know what you're talking about." And I would expect not to get paid for quite a while. In fact, I've just spoken to one of my podcast guests, is a voiceover actor. And quite surprisingly, because in lockdown, as you say, lots of people are pivoting, and lots of actors are thinking, oh, I'll do voiceover work, I can sit in a room and do that. But, you know, like anything, you have to take time, you have to kind of do that apprenticeship of paying out for training, paying out for equipment, and putting yourself forward for those sort of those presentations where you're not going to be paid. Because not only is it your opportunity to practice your craft and get better and better, but you are being seen by more and more people that will remember you, that will then come back to you and say, look, I heard you do that presentation, I'd love for you to come and present for us. And then the more people that you meet, the more that you are in those spaces giving those talks, being that thought leader, finding what that message is for you. What is that idea that you need to share, that you want to share with your audience or with an audience, any audience? Then you need to get into those spaces and meet people. Tony Robbins, Tony Robbins actually started at school, public speaking. You know, he wasn't a fully formed speaker. He didn't just decide one day he was going to be a motivational speaker and step out and do that. It was years and years and years of practice before he became the speaker that he is today.
I think sometimes, especially in our, TikTok world or Instagram world or etc., we're looking for so much of this instant gratification. I do this activity, it gets me this money. I get this activity, I do this, right? And I think, so many people need to be more patient with the process. And I think that, especially, I mean, we've seen it with video, people in 2012 were saying, oh, you do a promotional video and then it prints you money, right? And I think for me, yes, yes, video is a powerful tool still, but I think it's something which has changed and evolved like everything across those years. We're not in 2012 anymore, for example, right? And what you and how you have to use it and how you have to leverage it now is going to be very different to how you used to be able to leverage it. But for those people who, are maybe on the fence about how do I come across as a speaker, not necessarily like the confident aspect, we've kind of covered that, like just practice and do it a lot. But how did either you or your students or people you work with, how do you come up with that signature talk, that thing you're going to actually talk about, right? Because surely there needs to be a level of content, right? You can't just go and I'm just going to go and bleh, because, I mean, you could do that, I suppose, but I think for me there has to be a level of at least semi-structure. You can, of course, right? But I don't think you should, and that maybe isn't recommended, right? So what would you recommend to people who are looking to build a structured talk to then build those reps, is what I would describe it as, to go and do, whether that's a presenter to camera or whether that's in front of rooms or doing workshops or whatever it may be, to build those reps so they can practice and practice and practice and practice.
I would say start with the audience. It's always about the audience. It's not about you. This isn't about you and your ego wanting to be a speaker, wanting to be in front of a camera or on a stage. This is about the audience. Why do they want to listen to you? Why should they listen to you? Why should they care about what it is that you're saying? Because if they don't, you're never going to work as a speaker. You're never going to get those opportunities to practice even. So you need to find out for yourself who that audience is. Who are you talking to? and why is it important? And if you haven't got that, then you haven't got any content. So once you've found your audience and you know why it is that you're speaking to them and why they would want to listen to you, then that's where you start with your content. So I always say to my clients I kind of get them to do a brain dump. Why is it you're doing what you're doing? What is it that you want to talk about? Why is it important to the audience? Why are they going to listen to you? Get it all out. Just put it all down on a piece of paper. And then we can start picking out those stories. We can pick out the stories that are from your own experience that will relate to your audience, so that they can sit in the audience and go, oh God, I did that. I went through that. I understand that. And so that you can take your audience on a journey through your talk. So you take them on sort of a bit of a roller coaster of emotions, because I mean, there's that fantastic Maya Angelou quote: people won't remember what you did, they won't remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And that's what you want your audience to come out, that you want them to come out feeling something. And so for them to do that, you need to find the stories that relate to them. But also, obviously, you have a message that you want to deliver. So you need to find the stories that relate to the audience and also to the message that you're trying to put out there. And generally, what happens is that most people are wanting to get in front of that audience because of something they've been through. So it might be the reason they're running the business that they're running now is because of an experience they've had in their career, in their personal life, or whatever. There's something that's got them to the point they're at now. And that's what the audience want to know. That's what they want to find out. How can I get to where you are now? So you're not the hero. And this is something I say quite a lot, is you're not the hero of the talk that you're giving. The audience is the hero and you are the mentor. So you are the Yoda to their Luke Skywalker. And I think it was Nancy Duarte does a wonderful TED talk where she sort of analyzes the hero's journey through the different speeches of, Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs. And you can kind of see how these great orators have actually taken the audience on that journey. But there's always a reason that the audience are there. There's a reason that this talk, speech, whatever it is that your presentation needs to be shared. So your story and your journey is a good starting point.
I think it's a really powerful perspective, because sometimes when we create content or we look to grow or we look to be in a position where we can add value to the client, right, or to the person we want to talk to, right? But the thing is, for me, whenever we do and whenever we create a piece of content, or even now, I'm asking for a percentage of my audience's attention for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long, that they feel that they see value in listening to this conversation, right? And for me, I always think of content, and it's similar when speaking. You have to give back more than you're asking for in every case, right? And I can't remember exactly where the quote came from, but it was something on the lines of, if you can hold the attention of someone or give someone enough value to hold their attention for a minute, you can then get 10 minutes, and then so on, you can then get an hour, and then so on, you can get longer, etc. And I think it's around, and what we're talking about there, of course, is a nurture process, right? A nurture process of our client, but also something which I really took value from and gave me an actual idea to something that I've been meaning to do but haven't prioritized, and probably will prioritize now, is a second talk, because as you may know, I personally have a talk which is very marketing driven, but the thing was, the point of that talk was very tangible skill related. So it was, let's give the audience as much tangible skills as humanly possible to mean they can go and do something. It was never meant to be a inspirational story of how I overcame XYZ. I knew I was going to do one like that, but that was always going to be the one that I would build afterwards. It was always the one I built after I gained some more speaking experience. But the question there, I suppose, is, where does the balance really sit from your perspective between, this is a really inspirational story of how I overcame dyslexia, I'll use mine as an example, and then also the tangible, like technical, actually this is what you need to do, actually this is why you should care, actually this is how it's going to make your life better as the audience, as the person consuming, because as we just said, it's not about me. I could sit here and go, oh, my life is so hard, but it's laser and this and this and this, but no one's going to necessarily give a shit unless I give them a outputted goal of saying, if this is you, I did this, this, and this, and you can do this, this, and this as well. Let me help you, or how do you balance that when you craft a talk? I mean, I'm asking very selfishly now, right? But also it will be valuable for the audience as well, because for me, I'm about to go on the kind of combination of taking a very technical talk and a very emotionally driven, story driven talk, and hopefully combining them to be something magical is the goal. I mean, I'll throw it back to you, but how does someone combine that so the balance is all right? Because I think it can be very easy to go two way.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I think you've answered your question yourself in lots of ways there. I mean, obviously, what you've been doing up until now are basically how-to, informational, educational, and you want to move into the inspirational and the motivational. so it's kind of combining everything you know into a talk that is kind of a little bit more personal, it's a little bit more vulnerable, but exactly as you just said, that's what's going to bring your audience with you. So they're quite happy to, I can put a question into Google, into YouTube, and somebody will come up with a video that will tell me how to do exactly what it is that I want to do. Will that inspire me or motivate me? No, not really. It will tell me what I need to know, and off I'll go. If you then take your marketing informational activities with all of the jargon and the language and the technicalities and the data that is behind that, and want to inspire other people to go where you've gone and to do what you've done with what you know, then that's when you have to kind of, exactly as you said, put in those personal stories that kind of go, well, I've had dyslexia, I have dyslexia, and I have this issue, and this is what I did, and this is how I was feeling, this is how it made me feel, but here I am today. So it's that kind of, this is where you are, and this is where you could be. And so you kind of, you take them on that journey, but also along the way you craft it so that the message of the learning is in there too. So, with obviously this Steve Jobs is, informational, he's explaining the iPhone, but within that, he's kind of taking people from where they are now to where they could be. And that's kind of what you need to do with that kind of talk. Is why is marketing important to you? Why have you sort of fallen into this space? What is it that excites you? So find what it excites you about what you do, and put that excitement across to the audience. Find what's, the emotional side of it to you, and put that in there, because that's what they will feel as well. So it's the technical and the jargon stuff can come into it, but see if you can. And I did work with a young guy that was a marine engineer, and he'd kind of been pushed forward by his company to be the face of their YouTube channel. And he'd never done anything like that before. He'd been to conferences, and there was a whole load of technical stuff that I was sat in a room with him and I had no idea what he was talking about. But I said to him, explain it as if you are explaining to a 7-year-old. Talk to me as if I'm 7. And suddenly the way he was explaining things changed, because he went back to his childhood. He went back to, and he could feel how it was to be a 7-year-old, excited about the stuff that he's doing now. Because generally most people, especially running their own businesses, are doing something that they love to do. Otherwise they wouldn't. Why would you start a business otherwise? So there's something in there that makes you excited, that makes you emotional. So there's ways around finding that story and finding that journey in the content that you have to make it excited and make other people excited, engaged, inspired, motivated, all of those things.
I think when people start out, right, like anything, like they want to do video, they want to do talk, they want to do etc., they sometimes underestimate the work that it requires to do it properly, right? And I'm kind of with the perspective of you should do it, but then you should learn firstly to do you enjoy it, right? Building off what you were just discussing about enjoyment. For me, I was always like, let's just create videos for fun and see if I actually want to commit to doing this properly, right? When I was doing that, I was never pretending or implying that I was any good. I just did it because I wanted to gauge whether I was good or wanted to be good, right? But then what happens is you have this interesting period of just, you know what you want to achieve and you just need to put the hours in. And I think for me, building off again what you were talking about, because we look to do this in content as well, is we try to have an emotional transition from the start of the conversation or the start of the talk or the start of the workshop to the end. You know, for me, whenever I give a workshop or educational piece, most people come in and they go, I would never be on video, that's not going to happen, I can't do it, XYZ. And then by midway or halfway through, they've already created 3 or 4 videos. And they're in the position by towards the end where that's becoming quite normal and that's not this scary thing anymore. And I think the power of, like, because a lot of people ask me, well, what's the return on investment in talks and what's the return on investment in content and what's the return on investment? And it's very subjective in the way one thinks about it, but actually, arguably, it has a higher return on investment long term than anything else you can do, right? Because you're going to make it's not even a transactional relationship. It kind of transcends that, right? Because there's a high level of emotional, there's like a load of different things that it kind of weaves in, especially if you're in the level of talk which you were just discussing about building, where it's a combination between a personal anecdote, story, motivational, inspiring, etc., and then also in a technical aspect of, then I did this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you have this outcome, right? But I think because I think sometimes we can get very emotionally attached firstly to that talk, which is not always a bad thing, but let's say, for example, I give a talk and maybe it doesn't go down very well, or maybe it's not seen by many people, or etc., and I get slightly demotivated, right? I mean, we see this sometimes with content because it isn't getting the likes, the comments, except the views that one wants, right? What in your experience has really helped either you personally or people you work with kind of get to the point where they just carry on, right? Because there's got to be, in both of our spaces, a level of just, you have to outlast your competition for it to work.
I would say, don't think of it. If you're putting this signature talk together, this talk that is you, this talk that comes from the heart, that you've put all of this work into, that contains vulnerable parts of yourself, as well as obviously all of your knowledge, your expertise. Don't think of it as a one-off commodity. What you are creating is the bedrock of all of your content. So whether that's a blog, whether that's a thought leadership piece, whether that's a presentation to a networking space, whether it lasts for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour and a half, whether you're doing it in segments for yourself, in front of a camera, in front of your phone, it's once you've got that story. Now it kind of goes back, this is what I was thinking obviously when you were talking, was that when I was an actor, when you're an actor, you're given a character, somebody else has written those lines, but you have to fill in the spaces. You have to know where that character came from and why they're doing what they're doing, what's motivating them now. And this is something I've realized in lockdown since I've really been really working. I've sort of pivoted from the acting world into the business world, is that actually this is still something that's really relevant when people are kind of looking at content, is once they've read between the lines, they've got their story out there, even if they don't share it all of the time, they know it. So it's in their heart, it's their experience, their story. So that can be drawn on at any time. So if you don't think of it just as, this is my talk, this is how it goes, these are the jokes that I put in, this is this story I tell, then this relates to that. Think of it more organically as a piece that you've created that can be as I say, the basis, the bedrock of all of the content that you can put out there. Because once you know yourself, then it's authentically you. Now that's a word that keeps getting bandied about, this authentic thing, but it's absolutely true. And it's the truth of acting as well. If you're not telling the truth as a character, even if that character is a million miles from you, then your audience won't believe what it is that you're saying. So you have to really believe what you're saying. And so if you do this work, then you will find what is your story. And then you're not just churning out a presentation, a talk. You have something that you can play with. So you can go into any situation, you can go into any presentation, you can be called on to put together a talk together for tomorrow. I've got a 10-minute slot in a networking space. Can you come and do a Zoom presentation? Yeah, you've got it there ready. It's all there. Can you come and do an hour and a half for me in 2 weeks' time? We're doing a conference. There's going to be 1,000 people in the audience. Yeah, I can, I've got enough content there. You don't have to use all of the content all the time, but you have to get it out, be confident and happy in your own story, with your own journey, and with what you want to share, and know that it's relevant for the audience, no matter who that audience is. And then you won't be bored, because you're not doing the same thing all the time. You can adapt it for any audience.
I think it also kind of answers the what if I get it wrong bit, right? One of the main fears that people come to me with when it comes to video, or I imagine go to you with when it comes to speaking, is what if I get it wrong, right? But the thing is, if you're speaking from your passion, your heart, your story, and or you haven't made this structure that then is going to allow you to fall over yourself, you can't get it wrong, right? Should it be structured enough? Yes, of course, so you know where you're going to go, and then this leads on to this, and then this comes back to then connect with the beginning again to make a nice arc. Yeah, sure. But also, structuring it too much will actually be your Achilles heel eventually, because then you're just going to be like, oh my God, I haven't said this bit. Oh my God, now I can't say this bit. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's why I never work with a script. Never talk from a script. I'm going back to Tony Robbins and most speakers that are of any note, they know their story. Tony Robbins knows who he is. He knows where he's come from. He knows the traumas he's been through. They've made him the person he is. That means he can step on a stage, and no matter what comes at him from the audience, he can step into that audience, and he can talk, he can converse, he can deal with it, because he is confident and being his authentic self. And so he'll never go wrong. And that's what I say to people when we're putting together talks, is yes, they've got a certain amount of time that they need to fill. They need to engage, they need to enthuse, they need to educate, all of those things. But all they need is those stories and that journey. And they're, because, as you say, they're their own stories. They're never going to go wrong. People are just not confident in them, in their own worth sometimes. And actually, they have so much knowledge in their heads. They have more than enough content, but they just need permission to be told that it's good. What you have, people need to hear. And that's what I love to do, is to get them excited about sharing that message. Because once you've told them that actually they're perfectly relevant and worthy of sharing this message, then suddenly it can't, all of that nervousness falls away.
Yeah, and I think it's about, for a long time when I started speaking, I didn't trust myself because I hadn't had the kind of feedback loop of, I don't, in theory, make an idiot of myself by doing this, right? But I think that there's a level of, the more you do it, it causes the feedback loop to then build confidence, but also then you're like a little bit more ballsy, right? So, my advice to anyone who's looking to start creating content or start a talk is start something really technical, because it gives you a very easy yardstick to go, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this. Because as we've discussed today, when you enter that level of vulnerability, talking about these are the struggles I had as a kid, or these are the traumas I had as a kid, or these are the things that I grew up with and were struggles, you have to have a level of self-commitment and a level of, I guess in some ways, warranting yourself to trust it, but also that's how you have to kind of give and take, in the respect to, you trust yourself enough to be vulnerable, but also that most people aren't going to take the Michael out of that, but also even if they do, does that actually matter, right? It's about building that kind of shield around it so that you can talk about it. And one of the ways I found is the more you talk about a traumatic experience, I mean, this is the reason why counselling exists, really, is if you talk about it enough, it becomes kind of normal for you to discuss and becomes less painful. Now, there's pros and cons to both of those, of course, but I think it's about taking ownership and having, as you say, having permission to take ownership of that situation, and how can you use, I'll use my example as dyslexia, how can you use the pros of dyslexia, because there is lots, and focus on those and not the cons, right? Yes, there's issues. Yes, there's concerns. However, I've been fortunate enough to grow up in an age where technology is my biggest asset, and I can leverage it to basically make it so that I can have all the pros of dyslexia with none of the cons, right? Or barely any of the cons. And I think using that as an example, the same could be true for like any level of trauma once you're able to process it and go through that, right? And I think especially some of the most powerful talks that I think you and I have both probably consumed are ones that have those transitional, those like really wow or etc. Reactions. And I think as content creators or as people who share stories, we want to have that. We want, we don't want people to cry, but we want people to have an emotional reaction to the work we're doing and the craft that we have, right?
Yeah, and I think it's not about putting your trauma out there just for the sake of putting your trauma out there and trying to elicit sympathy. You're not doing it for that reason, but for exactly the reason that you've just said with the dyslexia, is by telling other people your story and by telling them that exactly as you've just said, you now have all of the pros of dyslexia but none of the cons. That's something that for some people in the audience would go, wow, that's amazing. I want that, I need that. And so it's not just unloading all of your trauma out there on an audience and saying, this is me, but it is taking ownership of something that is transformational, has been transformational in your own life, and using that story to help and give value to other people. If it's not going to help or give value and it's only your ego almost, or because of you need to get it out there, the audience are not your therapist, they're not your counselor. It's really finding those stories that are relevant. Otherwise, nobody needs to hear your trauma unless it's going to help them, really. So again, it's really all about the audience and not about you as a speaker.
I think I think it's from a point of healing, right? Like, you should only use the trauma or the things that are challenging for you in your past that you have 150% healed from. It's not, as you say, about, oh, I'm going to use this as a way to heal. No, you have to go through that healing process. You have to go through that process, whether that's therapy or whatever it is that you're going through. And everyone heals differently, right? So, there's other spaces for that. But I think for me, it's about everyone has a certain things they've overcome or they've kind of have achieved. Whether they realize that or not is a different conversation. But I think for me, and hopefully the chapter that I'm going to enter soon in regards to my speaking is going to be moving closer to actually this is the transition and this is the journey which we can help you go on as a company. Because I think for me, that's the bit that's powerful about speaking. That's the bit that's powerful about communication.
Yeah, I mean, you want to transform. You want to be able, you want to be that conduit that's kind of got people from one place to the next. And it really is about taking ownership, as you say. Once you've kind of got to that space where you can really you can own your story. And thought leadership is slightly different, because you're not necessarily going to be telling your trauma and telling your stories, but you need to be provocative somehow. You need to challenge the audience, and that's a different kind of talk to be giving. That's a different way of approaching what it is that you're saying. That's really about knowing your stuff and wanting to deliver something that's quite different. But again, it does come back to, why are you doing it? Who are the audience? Why do they care?
Yeah. And I think also, like, it's about creating that profile of who that audience is, right? Because you can't be everything to everyone, right? So we say, oh, who's the audience? But sometimes I think people will jump to the conclusion, well, it's every business owner, or it's every this or every that. It's like, well, actually, if you're not being specific in what you are, and what you're selling and what transition you can give, then you're actually nothing to no one, right? Instead of being or you're everything to everyone, but then you're actually nothing, right? So I mean, how does someone build their specific? Would you suggest they build their specific sector, their specific thing, whatever that may be?
I think it's still worth putting it all down, what it is that you really are there for, what it is, the message that you want to share, and really just putting I mean, I'm a great user of, I'm looking at one right now, is this sort of mind map thing that, I put whatever that is in the bubble in the middle, and then all this sort of spider legs come off it, and it's kind of creating that sort of mind map of what it is that you want to share. What are the issues that you want to solve? What is it that's going on in your world, whether it's marketing, whether it's social media, whatever, whatever your sphere is? What are the challenges? What can you bring to the party? What can you do that nobody else is doing? And then again, going back to the acting, if you're looking into characters, it's about research. It's about literally digging deep into different things, getting those ideas down, putting everything down, and then finding again how you're going to take your audience on that journey so that they understand, are engaged and interested, and so that they end up coming out at the end of your talk having gained something.
And I think there's a lot of crossover with, like, building at the beginning of when we discuss people pivoting into different parts of their business or operating new services, etc. I think for me, that's how you should tackle a new service. Like, if you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to have a coaching offer, or I'm going to have this offer, I'm going to have this, I'm going to sell this product, etc. How are you going to be in the position where you know how to position it, or how to sell it? Because if you don't know what's around it and you don't know what else is in the market, it's going to be very difficult for you to then sell that thing, whatever that makes it. And that's not saying that if it is a competitive market, because I think every market that makes money, arguably right now, is very hyper competitive. But the thing is, it's about establishing what is there so you know how to spin it or be unique and different in what you do, right? So let's say you are developing a coaching offer. Okay, what other coaches firstly, what are you going to coach? How are you going to coach? Are you going to be a business coach? Are you going to be a video coach? Are you going to be a speaking coach? Are you going to be a fitness coach? Are you going to be a nutrition coach, etc., right? And then when you understand that, what specific sector, what in that industry, or what specific business or whatever it is, what are those other people doing that are already established, quote unquote, in there? How are they marketing it? What are their unique selling points? And how can you either emulate them so they're more important, so they're more closer to what your journey is, but also how does it synergize into the rest of the stuff that you do as a company? Because I think the companies that are really going to thrive during the next couple of years of this economic challenge are going to be the ones who can have, hey, we can do this for you. Oh, also we can do this. Oh, actually, you have this problem, we can fix that too. Because I think if you're too one-dimensional right now, you're going to get in very hot water very quickly. And that's something I've noticed across the last 6 months as we've sort of transitioned into being a multiple service kind of, we can help you on this, this, and this, more than just one transactional, like we're just video production, for example.
But do you find that, because I believe we are all our own USP, we are all our own unique selling point. So there may be thousands, millions of video coaches, but there's only one of you. So there's only one person that's going to do that in the way that you do it. And so it's about stepping out from behind your logo, from behind your blog and anything else, and actually showing up with personality to your customer. And alongside that, you need to have all of the knowledge and experience that obviously puts you not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to be so much better than your competitors, but if your clients and your customers can see you and can hear you, then you build a relationship, and that's what they will buy into. Is that I'm sure people come to you, Carlton, because they've seen you, because they know who you are, they can trust you because they understand you. So if you can do that as a business owner, if you can put yourself in that content, and it's not a comfortable place for lots of people to be, but as I say, just baby steps, just little nuggets, turning up in a Zoom room on a networking event, just being there, just showing up, the more people that you get to know, the more relationships you get to build, then that will start putting you ahead of the competition.
And I think sometimes people misunderstand, and building off the trust element that we talked about before, about how good they actually are when they just focus on what they need to do, right? Like, so many, I've been surprised a couple of times this week because people are having one-to-ones with me who I've never met. I've met them a couple of times in networking, but we are having conversations as if we've known each other for literally years, just because of the volume of content that I produce and how quickly that can get someone to know, like, and trust me. Because the thing is, it's a tangible, relatable, scalable skill of creating content. Yes, of course, you should still have meetings, calls, conversations, etc. Of course you should. But the problem with those are always going to be you have to trade time every time for that relationship building activity. With content, you can do it with multiple people with the same piece of content, which is why every single large, medium-sized, etc. company, you'll notice very quickly as they start growing quickly, they'll start pivoting into how do you create a load of content that does the nurture process for you. Because I think we underestimate, because maybe we're not getting the likes or the comments or the interaction or the endorphin things that are there. We sometimes write off content as, oh, it's only been seen by X number of people because the views are down, or it's not what I expect. But actually, if you're niching and you're connected with the right niche, it doesn't matter how many people see it. It doesn't matter if they like and share it, as long as they're lurking and consuming it, because you will just have this kind of passive kind of trust aura eventually that kind of happens just because you're showing up so consistently, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's building community as well. I've learned that big time in lockdown. I came in as somebody that was doing lots of workshops in venues, working in schools, doing stuff very locally, actually. And when it came into lockdown, suddenly I'm on screen. I didn't even realize that I could do an improvisation class on a Zoom call, but turns out you can. And communicating with people all over the world. So my network has built incredibly. And people now know me, so they know my face, they know who I am, and this is something that's not going away now. This is something people are going to have to kind of get used to, and if they want to build those relationships, then they need to sort of be seen. And so that's it. So building those communities and becoming part of communities where you can kind of really get to know people well is really going to help your business, because people, and that's how you kind of retain business too, is because people come back because of you, not necessarily because you've got a great logo.
Yeah, and I mean, I think those brand elements like logos and etc. can really help reinforce the points that you're making in person, or you're making for your content or your reputation, so to speak. But at the end of the day, people are going to buy from you as a business owner, right? When the transaction happens, and no matter how they got there, who's going to be the one that they work with, number one. Number two, who's the person who's going to have to sell it to them? In most cases, with medium-sized business owners, it's you, right? It's the same person in content. So why are you not trying to create stories that allow you to leverage the things that you've had challenges in, but you've overcame? Because they're things that should be celebrated. They're things that should be articulated to say, actually, yeah, you can do it too. Long story short, I want to become someone who, if you have dyslexia and you're growing up with it and you're struggling with, I want to be someone who you can look, that person can look towards and say, look what, like Richard Branson when I was growing up, yes, you've got dyslexia, but you can also, that shouldn't stop you from being one of the most wealthy, powerful, etc., 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 whatever your definition of success is, person on the planet. Just because you have dyslexia doesn't necessarily mean you're handicapped in respect to you will never be able to be successful. Yeah, it's probably going to be harder. Yeah, you're probably going to have to twist and turn and maybe think slightly outside the box and etc. But actually, that's what's going to make you successful now, because we are moving away from traditional, you create a sales funnel, you create targeted advertising, and that's how you get clients. It's now all becoming interest-based. Like, we saw it with the rise of TikTok in respect to all of the platforms are now going towards interest-based content, which has kind of been the biggest equalizer, because before you had to build a large following and then etc. Now followings arguably are actually going to become slightly more obsoleted, because it's just going to be down to, do you connect with the audience that you're trying to connect with?
Absolutely. And it is that connection. And that's, as I say, your community your mailing list, the people that really want to know you and work with you might be very small, but that sometimes is all you need, because those people are the people that really care about your business and care about what it is that you're doing. If they're not interested in what you're doing, then why should you try to connect with them, really? Because they're not going to buy from you. So it doesn't matter really whether you've got 10 followers or whether you've got 100,000 followers. If those 10 followers are going to be your customers and they're going to come back again and again and again, then they're the ones that are important.
Absolutely. And I think, it's something which I really found really early was, don't worry about numbers and vanity metrics, because what's actually going to pay the bills, right? It's not necessarily, oh, I got loads of comments, so the person I'm only to, can I give you these comments as payment? No, you can't. And or etc. So I think, and I'm conscious of time, so I think let's wrap up soon, but I think it's an interesting shift in mindset. And I think the people who, what would you say as a final thought for people who kind of like what we've discussed here today, but need that starting point, I need to do one thing, like what can people do to start their journey on a signature talk, or creating a talk, or starting to create a pillar of content, or etc.? How would you suggest that what's that first step for them?
I would say do some writing, and do it for yourself. Don't do it for anybody else, but get out of your head the reason that you're doing what you're doing, and what it is that you want your audience to go away with. And once you've got that, then you can start finding the stories, and then the stories will become the content. And so I think it's really worth just sitting down and finding what your story is, and what, Simon Sinek obviously did that, the TED talk on what is your why, but it really does come down to, who are you and why are you doing what you're doing? And I think once you've got that, you can start thinking about the content.
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful place to be, because I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves going, what camera am I going to use? How's it going to sound? How's it going to look? But the reality of the fact is, the difference that's really going to matter is what comes out of your mouth when it's go time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as I said before, if you don't believe what you're saying, then your audience won't believe what you're saying. And that really needs to come from you. That needs to come from inside you.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. But for those people who have really enjoyed this conversation, want to connect with you, they want to hear more about what you do, have that conversation, where's best for people to connect outside of this conversation to continue this conversation with you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Jackie Goddard, Power to Speak. They can connect with me there or DM me there. My website is www.powertospeak.co.uk. It's in a little bit of a transition at the moment, so there's not a lot of the resources on there that I'd like for there to be, but hopefully that will change soon. But I have several coaching programs, including the Signature Talk masterclass program, which is up and running at the moment. So if anybody's interested in putting that Signature Talk together, then come and find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for coming back, never mind. Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode and you're now more informed on how to create that signature talk. And I will be creating the one I alluded to in this episode very, very soon. And I'm going to be hopefully being able to give that across some of the networks and stuff that I'm part of. So that'll be exciting in the coming weeks and months. But thank you so much for coming back once again. And if you did enjoy this episode and do not want to miss next week, then make sure to be subscribed to the channel. And I'll see you